On a crisp morning in Washington, D.C., as the first rays of sunlight touched the marble columns of the Supreme Court, a sense of anticipation filled the air. The city was waking up, but for many, this was no ordinary day. The nation's attention was fixed on the Supreme Court, where crowds had gathered before dawn. News crews jostled for position, eager to capture every moment of what promised to be a historic showdown. Inside, 9 justices sat in their high-backed chairs, each aware that their decision could redefine the boundaries of presidential power over the economy. The weight of history was palpable in the hushed courtroom. The case at hand, American Institute for International Steel v. United States, was more than a legal dispute. It was a battle over tariffs, the reach of executive authority, and the very principles that guide the nation's governance. The stakes were enormous. Jobs, entire industries, and the structure of government itself hung in the balance. For factory workers and business owners across America, the outcome could mean prosperity or hardship. Outside, protesters waved signs and chanted slogans, while business leaders huddled in tense conversations. The scene reflected the country's deep divisions and the passionate debate over the future of American trade policy. Inside the courtroom, anticipation was thick. Every eye was fixed on the bench as the justices prepared to rule, knowing their words would carry consequences for generations. The central question was clear. Should the president have the power to unilaterally reshape the American economy through tariffs, or should Congress hold that authority? The answer would set a precedent for future leaders. This wasn't just about trade policy, it was about the separation of powers at the heart of the Constitution. The outcome would test the checks and balances that define American democracy. As the courthouse clock neared 10, the nation held its breath. Across the country, millions waited for news, aware that history was about to be made. The verdict would echo far beyond the courtroom, shaping not only America's economic future, but also its constitutional legacy. The world watched, knowing the decision would have global implications. The Supreme Court was about to speak, and as the justices prepared to deliver their ruling, the world was listening, waiting to see how the balance of power in America would be defined for years to come. To fully grasp the Supreme Court's decision, we must delve into the complex origins of the tariffs that have stirred global economic waters. This journey takes us back to the roots of the tariffs, a pivotal moment in recent trade history. During his 2016 campaign, Donald Trump made bold promises to rejuvenate American manufacturing. He vowed to tackle what he saw as unfair trade practices, particularly those involving China, which he accused of exploiting the U.S. economy. After assuming office, Trump invoked Section 232 of the 1962 Trade Expansion Act. This provision allowed the imposition of tariffs if imports were deemed a threat to national security, a move not seen in decades. In 2018, the administration declared that steel and aluminum imports pose such a risk, thus justifying the imposition of sweeping tariffs on these materials. Initially aimed at China, these tariffs quickly extended to allies like Canada and the EU, igniting a wave of global retaliation and diplomatic tensions. What began as a protective measure for 2 key industries soon escalated into a full-blown trade war, causing widespread disruption for businesses and consumers around the world. These tariffs marked a significant departure from decades of free trade policies, betting on protectionism as a strategy to boost American jobs and industries. Supporters hailed it as a long-overdue action to protect American interests. However, critics argued it was a reckless overreach that could backfire economically. This bold use of executive power set the stage for a constitutional showdown, challenging the limits of presidential authority. The legal battle was inevitable, as the stakes were high, and it was only a matter of time before it reached the Supreme Court, where the future of these tariffs would be decided. Legal challenges erupted almost immediately after the tariffs were announced, sparking a fierce debate across the nation. Steel importers, led by the American Institute for International Steel, sued, arguing the president had usurped Congress's constitutional authority over trade. They believed this move threatened the balance of power. They claimed Section 232 was an unconstitutional handoff of legislative power, a dangerous precedent that could alter the fabric of American governance. The government countered. Congress had set clear criteria, and the president acted within those limits. They argued that national security concerns justified the president's actions. The Court of International Trade sided with the government, citing precedent for broad executive power in national security. This decision underscored the judiciary's deference to executive judgment in such matters. The importers appealed, warning that national security was being stretched to justify almost any tariff. They feared this could lead to unchecked executive power. The appellate court again ruled for the government, deferring to the president's judgment on security threats. This ruling reinforced the executive's latitude in defining national security. With lower courts upholding the tariffs, the plaintiffs petitioned the Supreme Court. They sought a definitive ruling on the constitutional limits of presidential power. The justices agreed to hear the case, recognizing the profound constitutional questions at stake. This case would test the boundaries of executive authority. The stage was set for a historic decision on the limits of presidential power. The implications of this decision would resonate throughout the nation's legal and political landscape. The outcome would determine who truly controls America's economic destiny, Congress or the president. It was a pivotal moment in the ongoing struggle over separation of powers. The nation awaited the court's answer with bated breath, understanding the gravity of the decision. The stakes had never been higher, as the decision would shape the future of American governance and its impact on global trade. At its core, this case was about the separation of powers. The plaintiffs argued that Section 232 let the president bypass Congress, undermining the Constitution's design. They warned that vague definitions of national security gave the executive branch unchecked authority over trade. The government countered that Congress has long delegated power in complex areas like foreign policy, with Section 232 providing a clear process and limits. They urged the court to defer to the political branches, not intervene in policy disputes. The justices faced a fundamental question: had Congress surrendered too much power, or was the president simply executing the law? The answer would redefine the balance between the branches. The courtroom debate was fierce, with both sides invoking the founders' intent. The Supreme Court's ruling would set a precedent for generations. The tariff debate split the nation. Supporters, steelworkers, producers, and unions, saw tariffs as protection against unfair foreign competition and vital for national security. They pointed to reopened mills and new jobs as proof the policy worked. Critics, businesses, farmers, and exporters argued tariffs raised costs, triggered retaliation, and hurt more jobs than they saved. They saw the national security rationale as a thin cover for economic protectionism. Allies were alienated, and America's reputation as a trading partner suffered. The fight was about more than economics. It was about the rule of law and America's place in the world. The Supreme Court's decision would determine which vision prevailed. In a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court imposed new limits on presidential power. Chief Justice Roberts wrote that Section 232, as used by the Trump administration, was an unconstitutional delegation of Congress's authority. The court didn't strike down the law, but narrowed what counts as a national security threat. Tariffs now require a direct, plausible link to national defense, not just economic competition. The ruling told Congress, you can't hand off your core responsibilities. The decision set a tougher standard for future tariffs, demanding clear evidence of a security threat. The steel and aluminum tariffs' legal basis was invalidated, though unwinding them would be complex. The court reaffirmed Congress's central role in trade policy. The decision sent shockwaves through politics and business. It was a powerful reassertion of checks and balances. The balance of power had shifted. The decision was not unanimous. Justice Gorsuch, joined by Thomas and Alito, dissented, arguing the majority overreached. They said Section 232 gave the president clear authority to protect national security, and the court shouldn't second-guess policy choices. The dissent warned that the new standard could tie presidents' hands in future crises. They accused the majority of judicial activism, inventing limits not found in the law. The dissenters argued that if Congress disagreed with the president, it should act, not the courts. The split revealed deep divisions over the court's role and the separation of powers. The debate over executive authority was far from settled. The ruling's impact is immediate and far-reaching. Importers may see relief from high costs, while domestic steel and aluminum industries face renewed competition and uncertainty. Unwinding the tariffs will be complicated, with ripple effects across supply chains and communities. The decision reignites debates over free trade and protectionism, especially in America's industrial heartland. Internationally, the ruling signals a return to more predictable rules-based trade and a chance to repair strained alliances. Congress now holds the reins on trade policy, promising fierce debates and lobbying. The decision checks the America First approach, restoring legislative oversight. Both parties must now confront how much power they're willing to delegate to the executive. The future of U.S. trade policy is up for grabs. The nation faces a new era of economic decision-making. The Supreme Court's decision is a landmark for constitutional law and American trade. It curbs the president's ability to unilaterally impose tariffs, reaffirming Congress's authority. The ruling changes the rules but leaves the next steps to the political branches. America's system of checks and balances has been tested and strengthened. The debate over executive power is far from over. In a fast-moving world, how do we balance decisive action with constitutional oversight? The court has drawn a line in trade, but the broader struggle over presidential power continues. The nation's future will be shaped by how we answer that challenge.